Former President Barack Obama making some huge news yesterday during the funeral of former Congressman John Lewis, where he talked about the filibuster. Let's throw that tear sheet up there on the screen. He called the filibuster, quote, a Jim Crow relic and backs a new Voting Rights Act. We have a little bit of the clip from that speech yesterday. Let's take a listen.
By ending some of the partisan gerrymandering so that all voters have the power to choose their politicians, not the other way around. And if all this takes eliminating the filibuster, another Jim Crow relic, in order to secure the God-given rights of every American, then that's what we should do.
Pretty big, huge news there, Krystal.
Absolutely.
And kind of the way I was looking at it.
It's a first for him.
Well, it's brilliant, actually, for the Biden campaign, because let's think about this. Obama, let's be honest, far more well-spoken, to put it nicely, and popular than Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So Biden comes out and he's like, yeah, maybe we'll do the filibuster. Then Obama goes out there, first of all, at the vaunted funeral of John Lewis,
right.
This huge mantle, and he's like, yeah, we have to end the filibuster. Now Biden can just say, I agree with former President Obama. He doesn't have to come out and take all of the political heat. A far more popular figure makes the case like Obama, and you get the ultimate result. So I don't think we can overstate how much of a titanic move in politics it would be for the filibuster to be gone. And for former President Obama to say it, that's now a mainstream Democratic position, right? Like, you are now going to have to argue against the most popular figure in the whole Democratic Party. Ask Bernie Sanders how difficult that one is.
Yeah.
Whenever you're trying to make systemic critiques. I don't think that filibuster is long for this world, and a lot of Republicans look like idiots for not doing it. A couple of years earlier under Trump, saying, "Oh, if we do this, then the Democrats won't do it." It's like, a lot of us tried to tell you so, but just a further erosion of that norm.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal. I mean, there's just no other way to say it.
It is a really big deal. I personally am fully, and have been for a while, in support of doing that because of the way it really has been overused and completely abused starting in the Obama era. I mean, once Mitch McConnell became Senate Majority Leader, the use of the filibuster just absolutely skyrocketed. So it just became a default, like, you have to get 60 plus votes in the Senate in order to get anything passed, essentially for any major piece of legislation. So it really has stood in the way as a roadblock for change. And especially, look, the Senate is sort of an undemocratic institution the way it is set up to start with, where you have equal representation for North Dakota as you do New York. So when you add the filibuster on top of that, it becomes even less democratic. So I support the move here. And I think it's also, though, the way that they've rolled this out, they first had, wasn't it Krystal who first, or one of,
it was the senator
Ted
from
Kaufman?
Delaware. I can't remember. I forget his name.
Okay, it was one of Joe Biden's close associates who was like, we may go forward with the filibuster, I may support the filibuster. And then Joe Biden himself comes out and says it.
Yes.
And then you have Barack Obama coming out and saying it. I think it's also strategic. Chris Coons, that's right. I think it's also strategic in terms of they're putting a lot of pressure on Republicans to at least cooperate with them somewhat to try to stave off this outcome, because they're putting it on the table like, look, if you don't want to work with us on absolutely anything, if you're going to run the same playbook that you did in the Obama era, which is just obstruct absolutely everything, then we have this option available to us. And especially now, looks very much like Democrats are likely to take control of the Senate. So it's not an idle threat here.
The most interesting part about this is going to be the intra-Democratic Party fight. This is something Manu Raju observed over at CNN, which is that, look, the Joe Manchin very recently called it literally BS on Democrats' push to eliminate the filibuster. It wasn't just Manchin, though. Kristen Sinema and a few others within the Democratic Senate caucus who are completely against it, mostly from people who are from red states like Arizona and from West Virginia. So remember that you need 51 plus votes in order to nuke the filibuster. And if, let's say, the Democrats do retake the Senate, they probably will have 51 seats, maybe 52 if they were likely to get it. I mean, it's possible they could have 60, but it's very unlikely.
Yeah.
And if that were to happen, though, and you only need 3 Democratic votes to join the Republicans to not do it, I don't know if they would be willing to withstand that type of political pressure, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, but they could also get outsized political benefits in their home states for doing so.
It's Manchin's in a very unusual situation at this point where, from a national level, obviously he's a Democrat. The state has trended loves Donald Trump, very red, in terms of most of how they vote at the national level. He's been one of these very unusual figures who's uniquely popular in his state. But the more that people see voting for Joe Manchin as like voting for Chuck Schumer, the harder it is for him to hold on, even as popular as he is in West Virginia, to his seat, essentially. So that's the situation that he's in. Someone like Sinema, it's a little bit different because Arizona is trending more and more. But that's the basic dynamic is if you are representing a state where the political lean is different from whatever your partisan affiliation is, you want to be able to separate yourself from the national party. You don't want people to feel like if you're Krystal Sinema, if you're Joe Manchin, that voters are, by backing you, effectively backing Chuck Schumer. So that's why they're resistant here. But another development, and this is a big deal, Bernie Sanders, under a lot of pressure in the Democratic primary, never came out and called for the end of the filibuster.
Not once.
He called for reform. He called for using reconciliation to get major legislation passed. He called for making it so you actually have to hold the floor in filibuster, which is another thing that I think is a good idea. But after Obama's remarks, Bernie Sanders also falls in line here and says it's time for the filibuster to go. And like I said, I agreed with that position during the primary as well, because it's just been so abused. It has stood in the way of progress. And I really do think that if you win an election, if you have a majority, if you're able to take control, you ought to have a chance to enact your agenda. People have ultimately voted for that to occur. So if you have all of these undemocratic roadblocks in the way of allowing that agenda to go forward, I don't think that it serves the interests of the American people. Another piece here that I wanted to talk about, I watched all of Obama's speech yesterday, and it's so interesting watching him. First of all, he's so good.
Yeah, he's the best politician of our lifetime. No
skilled, right? Just as a political animal, he is so skilled. He he's meets the moment, the words, the energy, the delivery, all of those things. And yet, gosh, it's so sad to me to think back to the way that I felt when he first got elected. And I wasn't even like a big Obama people. A lot of people my age especially were like all in, like he was a rock star. They adored him. They thought he was going to be like everything for the country. I was never in that realm. But of course, I was excited about the history making. Democrats took control of the House, supermajority in the Senate. He ran on ending the wars. Like I really thought that this signaled an actual positive change. And so seeing him again deliver this speech just made me reflect on how different the reality of his administration and all that we've gotten since then too, by the way, was from that promise that I felt in the beginning. And it made me deeply sad.
Yeah, well, it's like, dude, you were president for 8 years. You didn't do any of this, right? Like, he didn't even call for ending or even filibuster reform as president. And just looked it up until 2015 in a Vox interview after 7 years of being in office. In 2005, he actually spoke out against the end of the filibuster. And look, Obama this is what he always was. Empty rhetoric. He's the best at meeting the moment, appearing, making you feel comfortable.
Unbelievable.
Feeling in charge. But whenever he was in the White House, he did not do any of that. He is probably more responsible as anybody else because I really believe, I think he was smart enough to do it. And I think that he had God knows he had a political mandate in order to stem the tides of what was to come. And he didn't do any of that. Look at the war out of Afghanistan. Look at Iraq.
Yeah.
Look at the state of the U.S. economy. Remember, I think I was telling you how arrogant he was in 2012 whenever he truly believed he had saved the U.S. economy and that voters would give him the benefit of the doubt. And he kept going out there and talking about, we brought everything back. And his advisors had to be like, sir, like a lot of people are still hurting from the Great Recession. Like, you can't talk this way. And if Mitt Romney had run against him from an economic left position, I think he would have won.
Well, and look, part of the backlash that leads to Donald Trump, it is in part a racial backlash, but you can't explain Trump and Bernie Sanders, both of those populist movements and the mass amount of energy behind them without reflecting on, like, what is this a backlash to? It's a backlash to the Obama era. It's a backlash backlash to this like centrist, technocratic neoliberalism that he was so committed to till the very end.
He still is.
He still is. Yeah. I mean, to the very end, after seeing the way that they just wanted to obstruct, after seeing the way that they had no interest in helping you govern, there was still this desire constantly to try to find the center, to try to work with Mitch McConnell on some grand bargain or whatever. And so ultimately, looking back at this, and it's even reflected in this speech, some of the right-wing criticism I saw of Obama's speech yesterday was like, oh, it was so political. And I was like, okay, give me a break. My issue is actually that voting rights is obviously critical and essential, and these democratic reforms are really important. But they ultimately are in and of themselves hollow and meaningless without having any content. Okay, what are you voting for? And also not recognizing the fact that, look, we voted for these people who are here. The American public, 80% wants the stimulus checks out, 2/3 wants the unemployment benefits out. There's such a disconnect between what people actually want and vote for and what they end up getting. Just saying vote alone, it's become kind of meaningless. You got to have something else to say there too. So my criticism was kind of the opposite of the right wing, like this is too political. I'm like, we need to be more political. We need to be more clear about what we actually want, not just like, go out and vote.
I went out and voted, and I'm not getting what I want. So did you. A lot of us did, and we never get what we want. Haven't gotten what we want for 45 years. How did that happen? He was very much a part of architecting that. So I think that, look, he'll never reckon with the fact of what he really did whenever he was in office, and he thinks he's God's gift to earth. And he's a great politician. I'll always give him that. But beyond that, a lot of it's hollow.
More Rising for you after this.